Those days. I remember those days.
Hello, vinyl community. This is Tommy, and welcome to another musical adventure. And it's been a few weeks since I posted a video. I've been pretty regular about posting this year, but I kind of took August and took some time. Of course, if you've been watching and following any of my social media, you know I've been busy, but if you haven't already, you can go and see our record crawl featuring Sam St. John and Beetle Brad and my friend Ross. It's over on Beetle Brad's channel. I think it says Let the Hunt Begin or Let the Vinyl Hunt Begin. And so that I let Brad do a lot of the chronicling, because for those of you who regularly watch my channel, if you go back to last year's record crawl, we kind of went to some of the same places, and I just didn't feel like doing video this year. I said I'm going to do more digging, and that's what I did. So I let Brad handle the video duties on this one. It was still a lot of fun, and if you were a fan of that video as I was of last year's video, then go check out Brad's video. It's just a lot of fun to watch, and I hope that some of the enthusiasm that we had on that record hunt kind of comes through. And that goes without saying. I mean, check out those channels, Beetle Brad and Sam St. John. You probably already have. Some of you are probably here because of those guys. And so I thank you. If you haven't done so, subscribe, hit that button, and all that. So today's video, let's get right to it. It kind of stems from a previous video that I did a couple of videos back, where I was talking about one of my very favorite bands, and I got a couple of the recent reissues. R.E.M. This is the 2004 album, Around the Sun, and this goes back to the video that I did a while back called I Don't Have Time for That, and I discussed getting the vinyl reissue. It came out at the same time as Collapse Into Now. Collapse Into Now was their final album in 2011, and right before they broke up. And so they've recently been reissued on vinyl. Very nice copies. And I also picked up very, very recently, like in the last few days, Accelerate, which was the next to last album. I believe this came out in 2008, so it's the next to last album, three-piece version of the band. And I remember when this album came out, I liked it quite a bit. I felt like it was the first R.E.M. album that I actually was kind of excited about. Now, there's a lot of talk about the production. Jackknife Lee produced this, and it's very loud, and so it's kind of muddy. Some of that's been helped by the vinyl reissue. It was cut at Coherent Audio. Those of you that know, it wasn't not cut. This one was not cut by Kevin Gray. The other two were. But anyway, and of course, the other reissue that's about to come in the next week or two is the album Reveal, which is another one. So these later R.E.M. albums post Bill Berry. Now, for those of you who don't know, and I'm going to give a brief rundown because it ties into kind of the question of this video. R.E.M. was a band that formed in Athens, Georgia, back in the early 80s. Michael Stipe, vocalist, Peter Buck, guitarist, Mike Mills, bass player, and Bill Berry, drummer. They went on to be a huge college radio band, recorded for IRS Records. By the late 80s, they signed a major record label deal with Warner Brothers, and subsequently became one of the biggest quote-unquote alternative, not a big fan of that term, but college rock bands. A lot of hits. The albums Green, Out of Time, Automatic for the People. Huge selling albums. They followed that with Monster. Then they signed this huge $80 million record deal and did this massive tour behind Monster. And subsequently, Bill Berry, the drummer, he had a brain aneurysm while the Monster tour kind of kicked off, sidelined him for a few months, got back in, finished the tour. They did an album, New Adventures in Hi-Fi, that was largely recorded on the road during sound checks and rehearsals for the Monster tour. And Bill Berry announced that he was leaving the band, leaving them as a three-piece. They kind of said, the big quote of the day was that they were comparing themselves to a three-legged dog. They said, a three-legged dog can still function and walk and all that, but, they knew they were losing a key member, and they went on to make a few more albums, Up, Reveal, Around the Sun, Accelerate, and Collapse Into Now. Then they called it quits. And they probably had 80 million reasons to continue on. In that period, so there's really three periods to REM. There are the IRS indie years, if you want to call it that. There is the Warner Brothers commercial success years, which runs from the late 80s through the late 90s. Then you have the three-piece version of the band. Now, fans are very divided about these periods of REM. I kind of came into REM right at the brink. Document, which came out in '87, was sort of my first big dip into REM. I became a big fan and have been a fan ever since. Monster came out when I was in college. That album divided a lot of people, but I loved Monster and still do. I love New Adventures in Hi-Fi. Up was the album they made post Bill Berry, and it felt like they kind of really went in a new direction. Now, a lot of people say, well, the drummer leaving the band, how big of a loss was it? Well, it was a big loss musically. I mean, you really didn't realize what Bill contributed musically to the group until he was gone. But I thought that Up and Reveal, they were Pat McCarthy albums. They were kind of, to me, felt like they were going more in line of the Radiohead sound, a little more experimental. And I sort of, the band lost steam for me. I wasn't just enamored with Up. Didn't really love Reveal. And then Around the Sun came out, and those of you can go back to my video where I talk about, I don't really have time for that. This is my least favorite REM album. Now, I know this album has lots of fans, but it came out in 2004, and I remember this was the first REM album that I bought, listened to, and just didn't care. Now, the vinyl reissue has kind of caused me to reevaluate it and go back and listen to it. And it's got some nice moments on it. I have to say, it's not a bad album. And I can't say that REM has ever made what I would classify as a bad album, but it's still my least favorite. I can say that with some degree of certainty. There are some decent songs on here. Maybe it would make a good EP. Maybe there's about 4 or 5 on here that would be okay, great. But for the most part, just doesn't do anything for me. It never has. Like I said, this vinyl reissue sounds really incredible. But even the band kind of has not been very kind to this album. They've talked about how they just were kind of going through the motions, and Peter Buck, the guitarist, famously kind of said that he just said, look, we're gonna have to do better. I can't do this anymore. I'm out. And so they came back a few years later, 4 years later, with Accelerate. And Accelerate was more guitar driven. It was just kind of more of what REM you could expect from REM. And then they knew when they went in to do Collapse Into Now, they knew this was going to be the final album. They kind of said, they were in the studio making this kind of knowing this was going to be the last album. So I feel like they took a lot of care. And I think it's a solid album. I mean, does it hold up compared to maybe some of the great albums in the 80s and early 90s? Nah, maybe not, but I think it's a decent album on its own. But I do remember when the time came and they announced their breakup, it wasn't really heartbreaking for me. I felt like it was time, like they did. And it was kind of a strange moment because I wanted to feel more emotionally involved in it because, again, probably one of my favorite bands of all time. Grew up loving them, listened to them pretty much my entire life. And, you would think their breakup would have affected me a lot more, but I was kind of like, when it finally happened, it was like, it was about time that happened. And I kind of was mad at myself for feeling that way, if you will. But one of the things I wanted to ask in this video and talk about is, that late period. Like I said, the disagreements, there's a lot of people that are IRS REM fans. Like, if it was anything after the IRS period, it's not worth hearing. I don't subscribe to that. I've never have. I love Green. I love Out of Time. I think those are marvelous albums on their own. But having said that, there are people that were kind of like after Bill Berry left the band that started to really, the shine started to come off. And I can kind of get behind that because it had that effect on me. I mean, each subsequent album without Bill Berry up to Around the Sun felt like to me like a band that was just running out of gas. Now they did pull it together for the last few years and make some really decent records. To me, they were and are. But it's strange though, because I am of the generation and of an era where R.E.M. was one of the biggest things. They were huge on MTV. They were big. Like you turned on MTV in the late 80s and early 90s, you saw R.E.M. The Losing My Religion video was huge. I remember right around the time Monster came out and they did the MTV Video Music Awards. That was a thing. A real thing, and you won awards for videos. But I remember, I was, early 20s, young man, late teens, early 20s, and I remember Hootie and the Blowfish, and I remember Darius Rucker, in the middle of the performance, he said, "I want to thank R.E.M. For just being a great band," and it was weird because they were one of those bands that just, I don't think now people realize how big they were and how much they meant to people at the time. But I feel like since the 2000s, as the 2000s wore on and into now, it's really just kind of they're not as regarded. And so that's kind of a long way of asking that question, what happened? Now, thankfully, I'm one of those people who's grateful that they have not reunited and gone out and done the tour. I think that I think if they were to do something like that, it would really tarnish, to me, a little bit of the legacy. I kind of hope they stay broken up, and I mean, I know there are probably people that are like, well, why let them go on the road? I mean, but I don't. I think it's fine to leave the legacy there, but I just don't feel like I mean, I don't see kids wearing R.E.M. shirts. I don't hear their name. To me, they don't get mentioned a lot here in the VC. And so my question is R.E.M., the legacy. I mean, is there a reason for that? Is it because those last few albums just really were, it was like a slowly dying train that finally just ran out of gas at the end and died? Or is it one of those things where, am I just missing something? Or are they the biggest thing in the world and I'm just not seeing or hearing it? But I feel like they're a band that's kind of just been forgotten about over the years. And I'm not saying forgotten about by people of my generation. I keep saying my generation. But, you younger VC viewers that are big music fans, I mean, where are you on R.E.M.? Now, some of you probably, your parents who are my age or older were probably really into R.E.M. And so you were exposed to it. But I'm just curious as to, they just don't, you're not going to go on Hot Topic and see R.E.M. t-shirts. It's just weird. You'll see Beatles, Pink Floyd, and Nirvana. But it's like R.E.M.'s just not there. And in my mind, they're as big. I guess a comparable band to that would be U2. One of those bands that was really big in the 80s, and they continued on. And I guess U2 is still big. At least they seem like they are. People seem very interested in what U2 have to say and do. So R.E.M., what's the deal? Are they a great band that's been forgotten in time? Have they not done a good job at maintaining a legacy? And I mean, even these reissues to me, I feel like have been kind of and maybe it's because the albums are like that. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Comment down below and make some R.E.M. videos if you haven't done any, or maybe if you have made some R.E.M. videos, put the link down there so I can go check them out, because I don't remember seeing any R.E.M. videos here in the VC. But I don't watch every video, so that's on me. So put your link down there. Anyway, that's all rambling stuff. Revisit those later albums. I think you might be surprised. And, there you go. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.